Snow fell fast and heavy, none of this wimpy wafting fluff, onto Bearizona's grizzly domain on a March morning during which, outside the enclosure, humans huddled in parkas hopping foot to ward off the cold while watching agape at the arson antics taking place not 30 feet away. But to the 3 grizzly cubs inside their habitat, this was downright balmy weather, prime conditions for play. These are Montana grizzlies, mind you, accustomed to sub-zero temperatures and epic snowdrifts, so a few inches coming down hard, heck, that's nothing to them. They rolled and tumbled, wrestled and roughhoused in their tricked-out 29,000-square-foot crib replete with a waterfall, pond, and moat. They reared up on hind legs and swatted at one another, playfully baring teeth and claw before one disengaged and lumbered to scratch his tawny-furred ample backside on a boulder. The other 2 snuffled around with curiosity, snouts in snow. But then along came Dave O'Connell, director of animals at Bearizona, to the fence bearing that familiar metal bucket in hand. That could only mean one thing: snack time for these frisky and feisty 1-year-olds. They stopped their antics and swiveled their snouts when they heard the call. "Come here, guys," O'Connell shouted. "There you go. Good job. Come on over." O'Connell raised a pear, tossed it in the direction of CROCKETT, the male cub already on hind legs and waving his paws for the treat. Hannah and Sky, the 2 females, followed suit, swiping at the air as O'Connell launched a couple of apples and another pear their way. All 3 balanced the fruit on the back of their paws and devoured it, then looked up expectantly, waving their massive front paws for seconds. The sparse crowd gathered outside the grizzly enclosure on this snowy morning at the wildlife park in Williams of course believed the bears were waving at them, not beckoning for more fruit. The humans dutifully waved back. This pantomime went on for about a minute. "Is that what you train them to do?" the mom of a tourist family from Ohio asked O'Connell, now cradling the empty bucket under his arm. He adjusted his ball cap and launched into the explanation he's just about memorized by now. "The thing about CROCKETT here, he learned to do this on his own," O'Connell told the family. "When they were in this enclosure, he'd sit up front and watch guests come up and wave at him. He just started waving back. We're afraid that he'd be sitting all day here with people waving at him and occasionally reinforcing with food they aren't supposed to, like hot dogs or churros, whatever, not good." Also, if you have not done so already, please subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell to get inspired by these animal stories every day. Now, back to the story. "Do people really throw hot dogs?" the woman asked, aghast. "We have signs everywhere, 'Don't do it,'" O'Connell said. "So we, the staff, reinforce the bears every time to wave only when we feed them. With guests not reinforcing them with food, the bears think, 'Why are these people waving at me all day?'" Feeding time over, the grizzlies lumbered off, snow crunching under their paws for more playtime. Yeah, this is the life. 3 square meals a day, salmon, trout, roadkill, and the occasional treat of a deer leg, and healthy snacks galore. These grizzly cubs are, O'Connell admits, a little spoiled. They are pampered, they have the run of the place, and they are getting fat and happy. All of which is good, because a year ago, the 3 cubs experienced a traumatizing event in the upper Rocky Mountain Front Range of Montana that threatened their lives. In an incident that garnered national attention, the cub's mother, a massive sow still nursing the little ones, was startled by a hiker up near Great Falls and attacked the hiker, mauling his leg in an apparent effort to protect her cubs. The hiker in turn brandished a pistol and shot the bear. Both bear and hiker turned and fled, the 3 cubs nowhere in sight. Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks officials were notified and an all-night search for the sow commenced. She was found the next day injured in the brush and euthanized. The cubs could not be found. A week later, in early April, according to reporter David Murray of the Great Falls Tribune, a local ranching family was returning home on a road near the Front Range when they spotted 3 cubs crossing a ditch next to the road. The rancher, Mike Briggs, called Montana FWP officials. Meanwhile, his wife Katie fretted about the fate of the cubs. "Our fear was that they would just get down there in that creek and either get killed by another bear, starve to death, or with the big storm coming in," she told the Great Falls Tribune. "They were doing kind of a little cub whine. When we started getting close, they were clacking their teeth. They weren't wanting us to get too close." It was starting to snow harder, and Katie worried the cubs would either starve or get killed by a male grizzly if they weren't captured. While waiting for officials, Mike, a cowboy, took matters into his own hands. He got some rope from his truck and deftly lassoed all three. Meanwhile, a neighbor had pulled up and removed a 55-gallon plastic barrel, and Mike plopped the three cubs into it and drove them home, where the couple's children named the cubs Larry, Mo, and Curly. "The second we put them in there together, they just literally curled up around each other," Katie was quoted as saying. "They didn't cry anymore. There were no noises from them. They were happy as clams." A Montana FWP biologist met the couple and the barrel of bears there and took them to a local wildlife center. The cubs were still nursing, so U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services workers bottle-fed them with a special formula and monitored their health before eventually transferring them to an accredited Association of Zoos and Aquariums facility. The agency, in a news release, explained that grizzly bear cubs cannot be released back to the wild, the FWP release noted. These cubs will be frequently handled for bottle feeding and will quickly habituate to humans. This would pose a significant human safety risk and drastically lowers their ultimate success in the wild. Meanwhile, at Bearizona, officials had long yearned for at least one grizzly bear to add to the park's diverse menagerie, which includes 38 rescued black bears. In fact, O'Connell said the owners had even erected a statue of a grizzly bear 2 years ago near the entrance for good luck and in hopes of eventually landing grizzlies. Arizona, which saw its last wild grizzly bear shot near Sedona in the early 1930s, has 2 grizzlies at a Tucson facility, one in Phoenix and another in Prescott. Bearizona bided its time, and it turned out that the COVID-19 pandemic worked in its favor in landing the 3 cubs. With the park able to stay open with the drive-through portion, we were able to stay open when other places were closing down, and maybe that moved us up the list, O'Connell said. So when we heard about the cubs, we threw it out there to Montana officials that if they needed a place, we were ready. After vetting, Bearizona was approved to get the bears last June when they were about 30 pounds each. The first thing they did was rename the 3. Crockett is male, named after the ranch where they were found, said O'Connell, who indicated Crockett will be neutered within the next year. Hannah, named after Jack Hanna, the famous zookeeper, because he loved bears and they loved him. And Sky is for Big Sky Country, Montana. Hannah was always a little more plump than Sky, more round and fluffy. Crockett is the biggest, with a bigger snout. Actually, the name change was the second thing Bearizona did. First, before the cubs' arrival last summer, workers remodeled what had been the facility's kinder cubs habitat for young black bears. "We built up all the walls tall and added a big pond and waterfall because the grizzlies love to be in the water," O'Connell said. "The grizzlies grow almost twice as fast as the black bears. I don't know that as a scientific fact, but it sure seems like it. That's why the last rock wall isn't painted yet. We were like, we gotta put them in there now because they're getting freaking big." How big? Since June, the cubs have gone from 30 to 200 pounds each, and they are definitely not done growing. O'Connell said mature male grizzlies can tip the scales between 600 and 800 pounds, a few even reaching 1,000. Females are more petite, between 400 and 600 pounds. So indeed, the grizzlies needed every inch of that 29,000 square foot space, but this enclosure too is only temporary. Bearizona has broken ground on what will be a 40,000 square foot C-shaped enclosure on multiple levels with elaborate ponds, waterfalls, and dens, as well as several viewing spots for patrons. "We want to get the new space right and make one of the best exhibits in the country," O'Connell said. "We're going to get an engineer in here. That will give the bears more room to roam. It won't be like existing in the wild, of course, but now that the cubs have been exposed to humans for nearly all their lives, being released to the wild would likely prove a death sentence." "It's not necessarily about size all the time," O'Connell said. "When it comes to taking care of the animals, we try to focus on giving them quality space that they'd have in the wild. The truth about animals in the wild is that they do roam and cover a large distance, but they're doing that to find all the things they need to survive: food, water, and shelter. When they have all that stuff in one area in the wild, they tend not to roam as far. Foraging is no longer a chore for the cubs since they are living large and get their meals delivered. Their diet consists of 85% fruits and vegetables, 15% protein. They love fruit, O'Connell said. In fact, they tear open oranges and suck out the juice like candy, he added. But Crockett, Hannah, and Sky are far from vegan. We want them to get huge, so we do salmon, trout, and pike donated by Arizona Game and Fish, he said. They also get ground beef with a bunch of vitamins put in. It's called the carnivore diet. They love it. We try to switch it up often. Sometimes Game and Fish will get them an elk leg or deer leg. The cubs love it. Tear the hide off one of those things, man, they're pumped about it. What's not to like? Free room and board, endless playtime, a chance to live a full life rather than face the existential threat of trying to go it alone in the wild. It is a tragedy, of course, that their mother had to be euthanized, but the Montana cubs seem happy enough frolicking amid the pines of the Kaibab National Forest. But remember, they'll now only wave during feeding time. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider sharing it with your friends and family. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next one.